It's Friday at 6 p.m. in the East. This is the Daily Wrap live from New York City. And welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Joe Concha. Joining me on the Wrap tonight, she is the co-host of Close Encounter. Lisa Jandovitz is here.
Nice to be back again, Joe.
Good to see you. You're looking well. And he co-hosts Steele and Unger on Sirius XM, also writes for Forbes magazine. Rick Unger, everybody.
What doesn't he do, that Rick Unger? You know?
Third,
you know?
We're
you
the
hear the applause
out
there?
already.
Do you?
That's what
Where's Terrell Owens? Third person. Unbelievable. She is an author, columnist, and Huffington Post writer, and a reverend. Wow, that's a trifecta. Jenny Crumpton joins us.
Hello, Joe Concha.
How are you, man?
I'm great. How are you?
Outstanding. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for taking the time out of your usual happy hours. We appreciate it. Let's get to the Daily Download. Oh, Brian Williams, what did you get yourself into? I'm sure the story is amazing. Flying a Chinook helicopter during the invasion of Iraq in 2003 and taking fire from RPG missiles and guns. Said helicopter was even forced to the ground. Man, that must have been scary. Brian Williams, war reporter, risking his life for you, the news viewing public. He told the story quite a few times over the past 12 years, including last week during a televised tribute to a retired soldier during a Rangers game here in New York.
We want to share with you a great moment that took place here in New York last night. The story actually started with a terrible moment a dozen years back during the invasion of Iraq, when the helicopter we were traveling in was forced down after being hit by an RPG.
Unreal. Really unreal. Actually, it's not real at all. Turns out Brian was lying. In the New York Post, oh, they're loving this so much. Can we see this? A nose for news. And it takes up the entire cover. It's quite remarkable. So, yeah, the Post, owned by Rupert Murdoch, who owns Fox, going after an NBC reporter. Wow, go figure. But he is taking it on the chin, certainly, and seems to deserve it. After feeling the heat, yes, Mr. Williams did apologize, or perhaps NBC told him to apologize.
I made a mistake in recalling the events of 12 years ago. It did not take long to hear from some brave men and women in the air crews who were also in that desert. I want to apologize. I said I was traveling in an aircraft that was hit by RPG fire. I was instead in a following aircraft.
Well, it is a quality tie. Here is more of the 55-year-old Williams eating crow.
This was a bungled attempt by me to thank one special veteran, and by extension, our brave military men and women, veterans everywhere, those who have served while I did not. I hope they know they have my greatest respect, and also now my apology.
And you won't believe it, but in late night, they actually made fun of him for this. The great Conan O'Brien didn't miss an opportunity to poke fun at his former NBC co-worker.
Y'all heard Brian Williams is having a little bit of controversy.
Yes.
Yeah, Brian Williams has admitted he embellished a story about being in a helicopter that was shot at in Iraq. Yeah, Williams says the helicopter part was true, but it was a coin-operated helicopter outside of a Chuck E. Cheese. But to be fair, it was in a very bad part of Connecticut.
Well, methinks Conan is going to be joking about this one for quite some time, as I'm sure the Jimmys and everybody else is in late night. All kidding aside, outside of a quickie statement from NBC President Deborah Turnus that came this afternoon, who basically said the network was looking into it, Williams will be anchoring again tonight and doesn't appear to be headed for any reprimand in any form. So, guys, two issues. How should NBC handle this? And can we trust anyone, besides us, of course, in the news? Rick Unger.
You know, they could start by making the apology an actual apology instead of trying to pretend he just misread the news. He actually tried to make that apology seem like, and the next story in today's news, it was terrible. It was a terrible mistake. NBC will do nothing because NBC doesn't have anybody ready to take a seat.
And I used that analogy today in my Mediaite column. I said, when Brett Favre was still with the Packers, they drafted Aaron Rodgers, and unlike every rookie now that plays game one, they kept him on the bench.
That's right.
2-3 years, learned from the great one, then they put him in. In NBC's case, the only person I could see taking over for Brian Williams if he gets let go is Ronan Farrow.
Clearly.
And that could be
he's the heir apparent.
an issue. But probably a Lester Holt, but no big name like a Brian Williams.
Lester Holt.
What's that?
It's not going to be Lester Holt.
It's not going to be anybody, in my opinion.
Yeah.
He's probably going to stay.
I think
Jenny?
he's going to stay. You know, on one hand, I sort of feel like he's like my grandfather who would just tell tales and they would get taller and taller. And it was really about communicating a larger meaning and maybe a little bit about ego. But, you know, I think a lot of TV personalities have a lot of power now, and I think they feel like they can just sort of tell stories and aren't necessarily going to be challenged. They can frame them however that they want. And you know, the audiences are a little different today with social media and with reality TV. We really, you know, we like a lot of drama. So,
but from a network news
bottom line
anchor.
is that he lied. He was not in that helicopter, and I don't know how you can, you know, twist it to say, oh, I misremembered, or I didn't remember something like that. And I think if he wasn't called out on it on that site online,
Stars and Stripes.
right, he
Very
would not have
credible magazine,
he would not have recanted. He was just called out by crew members who were there and said, "Hey, you weren't there with us."
So apologize
Oh, okay.
because he got caught. But
Exactly.
social media,
and
you mentioned
he's being
before.
questioned right now about his coverage in Katrina.
Correct.
As
I'm
well.
going to get to that in a second, but apparently Brian Williams has been in several places during his broadcast career. Let's put a couple of those up there. And there he is. He actually chewed his own leg off to save a squadron. Yes, that's enormous stories. That's one. What other ones do we have there in the control room? I know there's a couple.
I can't see it.
Well, that's actually
he's in
him.
Top Gun. He's in
Top Gun.
Wow.
And yeah, there he is.
There
So
he is in the back.
He's in the background. He's with
Yeah.
Maverick
Like
and
Zilling.
Goose.
Flies
So
fighter
Woody
pilot.
Allen's,
actually flew with them as well.
Yeah.
Remarkable. And there's another
on
one
the
as
moon.
well.
Live from the moon.
Yeah, he's actually on the moon, which the moon landing was in the 60s before Brian was even in broadcasting.
Right.
But apparently,
He's been everywhere.
he's been there. Point being, and we even have one more, Saving Private Williams. That's right. They went in to
forgot
get
about
him
that.
after
That's
they
right.
stormed
That's right.
Normandy.
Or he also
I forgot
saved
about
himself.
that. But getting back to Lisa's point before, now there's another story out there as well that he said he saw a dead body floating in New Orleans when
French
he was
Quarter.
covering in the French Quarter during Katrina. Only problem was that the French Quarter, according to pretty much everyone who was there at the time, didn't flood, so kind of hard for a body to float. So if this is proven to be...
It was crawling.
It was crawling.
Yeah.
If this is proven to be...
And he got dysentery also from swallowing.
That's right.
Despite that,
water
nobody got
What I
because he
don't
was
understand-
drinking the
Right,
water
yes,
on
he
the
was.
street.
What is the point of him doing
Actually,
this?
there's an answer to that. I mean, in all seriousness, think about this. He is the first guy to sit in that chair who wasn't a journalist. He was a newsreader at the local station here in New York.
And we
Interesting.
have
And that's
to,
what it is.
And we have to end it there. My final word is he probably isn't going anywhere because he's _1 and he's making them a lot of money, and it would take a hell of a thing to get Brian out of that chair. Anyway, wait till you hear the latest with the boneheaded move by the IRS. This is the Daily Wrap only on Newsmax TV. Yeah, welcome back to the Wrap, everybody. Now, I don't know how many of you have held corporate jobs in your time, but most companies tend to have pretty strict rules and standards for its employees, covering everything from vacation time to dress codes to intellectual property. And if an employee fails to follow these rules, said employee gets fired permanently. One would also assume and hope that the same basic principle would apply to high-level government employees as well, like those who work at, I don't know, the IRS. But that's not the case. A new report by the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration found that hundreds of former IRS employees terminated for a wide range of previous performance and conduct issues have been rehired. The report basically says, in a nutshell, why are you hiring problem employees? Okay, the language might be slightly different than that. Let's put up what we call a full screen graphic. We are concerned, is the quote, that the IRS may not adequately considering prior performance issues when selecting former employees for hire. For example, 2 employees were failing critical job elements at the time they had separated from their prior employment with the IRS. So exactly how many problem employees did they hire back? And why were they fired in the first place? According to the report, 7,168 IRS employees, get that number in your head, about 7,000, were rehired between January 1, 2010 and September 30th, 2013. The reasons for their termination varied, but apparently a number had a hard time over their taxes, or at least filing them anyway, which is kind of important when you work for the IRS. 141 of the formerly fired employees had prior tax issues, 5 of which were found by the IRS management to have willfully not filed their tax returns again. And no, we're not talking about Al Sharpton. They work for the IRS. And if that wasn't enough, the remaining terminated employees had prior substantiated employment and conduct issues, including, another graphic please, unauthorized access of taxpayer accounts, fraud, falsifying employee forms, email, internet misconduct, absence of leave, workplace disruption, stealing a stapler. I mean, you name them, they're on there. One employee who was absent without leave for 312 hours and whose file was explicably marked, "Do not rehired," guess what? Was rehired. What the hell is the IRS thinking, Mr. Unger?
It's obviously indefensible. I certainly wouldn't try to defend it. It really cuts at the heart of those of us who see government as having the potential to do great good. You hear a story like this and you just think government's a waste. But I'll tell you what really bugs me. Congress will, of course, have hearings over this, right? Mm-hmm. And the Republicans will use the opportunity to condemn Obama. The Democrats will use the opportunity to defend Obama. You know what they won't do? They won't find out who hired these people back and fire their you-know-whats.
That's a good point.
That's what they won't do. They won't get to the heart of how something like this can happen in a government agency. And we'll keep having the same problem.
Lisa, you file your tax returns as far as we know. What do you think
exactly.
about all this?
The question I have is, is why? Why hire these people back? I don't know of any other corporation where you could do something like, and especially where you're putting other people at risk in terms of taxpayers, us.
Is it crony IRSism?
It's stupidity.
Well, look, the IRS has about 90,000 employees. So 4 people stealing a stapler or whatever, that's not all that surprising.
I was kidding about the stapler.
Yeah, I know. I just like that example a lot. But in recent years, there have been several reports about staff shortages. So I think they may be having to rehire people because nobody wants to work at the IRS.
Well, she makes a good point. That who the hell wants to work there? So
Also,
you know what?
buried
That's
in
not
the
true. It's not true.
No, I did
they
research.
Have lots
it is true.
of applications, and we have these newfangled things called
There's
computers.
several reports
And
about
do you know-
staff shortages in the past few years.
Computers can
for whatever
actually
reason.
track when someone's been fired.
Right.
You can find employees. And there may be staff shortages. It's probably more
Come on,
about
I'm trying to
budgets.
get creative
Yeah,
here, Rick, and you're
it's a
totally
tough one.
ruining it.
Well, the unemployment rate's at 5.6%. That maybe there just aren't enough people out there to
right.
apply.
Want to work.
Right. Now we're going to discuss that actually later, which is should that really be the unemployment rate? So this is a tease within a segment, which is a good thing. But it's just amazing that the IRS, after all this time, just can't catch a break. That this sort of stuff gets out.
It's always been an ill-fated government agency because nobody likes tax man.
Well, doesn't your boss Steve
it'll
Forbes,
get
doesn't he
out.
want to get rid of the IRS altogether? Or
My
at least have a
boss
flat
at
tax?
Forbes very much wants to get rid of the IRS, wants to have a flat tax. I'll tell you what, I have told Steve that I could actually get on board the idea so long as you make provisions for people at the bottom of the ladder so that they don't get caught up in that. He agrees with that, by the way. Steve's proposal is not at all unreasonable. My big problem with that, as he knows, is you have to convince me that Congress won't go ahead and do what they've always done, which is start cutting special interest breaks to the flat tax.
Okay.
Stay honest to it. I'm cool with it.
Because we heard a lot about it during that one campaign. Was it 96 when
probably
he
when
ran?
Steve was running.
Yeah, and then suddenly that became. I thought somebody else would pick up the mantle and run on flat tax.
Well,
but
some
for whatever
are,
reason,
but not as effectively as Steve, because Steve is so credible on the issue.
right.
Yeah.
Will he run again? By the way, since we're on the topic.
But everybody used to like to make fun of the flat
Everybody
tax.
else is.
Right.
I asked him
Yes.
to.
Okay, everybody
he
else
won't
is
do
running.
it.
I figure why not?
Steve Forbes. I mean, everybody used to make fun of the flat tax, but
Yeah, no, they did. You're right. And it's not crazy at all. It's actually a very sensible proposal so long as you make allowances for people on the bottom.
Lisa?
That sounds like it makes sense, but it's still going back to the issue of what the IRS is doing. There is no explanation given, and that's something that really should be as to how these people got back in after doing some of the things, not doing some of the things that affected where they weren't paying their own taxes, where they were peeking at information that they were not supposed to. I mean,
Of course, you know, we
really-
did see that graphic where it was maybe 11 people out of 90,000.
Well, just for those certain things.
Right.
yes.
So,
But 20%
in
of
the
them
Wall
though,
Street
were
Journal
doing,
did
continuing
say,
to do things that were
But see,
wrong
that would
after
be,
they were rehired.
That would be a good defense if somebody were picking on the IRS
Well, it's not a defense,
for
it's
bad
just-
things happening. You know what I mean? But when, so you know, you could say though, you could say, look, it was only 4 people. I think that's a perfectly
and most
good
of
argument.
the rehires were
But
not
we're
conduct
rehiring them.
problems.
We're rehiring them.
But that's the
Right.
question. Why
Why?
are they rehiring so many people if, as you say,
crazy.
they're getting so many job applications at the IRS?
Look,
People just
It's
banging
still
down
no
the doors
excuse.
to
So
work there.
If any one person at the IRS was fired for looking up my information when they weren't supposed to, and they got rehired because they can't get enough people, I'm not okay.
They
with
were
that.
probably
Right.
looking up their date from Tinder,
Probably
you know,
right,
like,
yeah. That's
oh,
probably right,
so
checking their
this
credit.
new girl I'm dating, what's her taxes like?
Not
I wonder
okay.
if the people that keep reapplying or want to work there think they'll get some sort of tax break. Like, oh, well, I work here. So it's like working at McDonald's where you get 15% off your food.
Can you imagine being fired and then reapplying?
Well, you know,
No.
and I don't have this officially. I read about it in the Inquirer, but
Bizarre.
apparently Lois Lerner was rehired and she's running the IT department. And on that note,
The Inquirer.
I leave you. Anyway, coming up next, having a sick child, or at least one with special needs, is not easy on any family. But one woman gave her husband the ultimatum of a lifetime after learning their newborn son would be born with Down syndrome. What'd she do? We'll tell you next on The Daily Wrap. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap, everybody. I'm Joe Contra from New York City. This story will make you think. A New Zealand man who lives with his wife in Armenia recently had a baby boy who would be named Leo. The husband, Sam Forrest, was excited to meet Leo, but there was an unexpected surprise. Leo had Down syndrome, and even though the baby had a birth defect, Mr. Forrest thought his son was beautiful all the same. I think we have a picture of him there. And having a child not too long ago, I could certainly appreciate that first moment when you hold your child in your arms and you realize, oh, okay, I got some responsibilities ahead of me. The innocence just, and just the overwhelming feeling that you have. You're always told about it, but until you experience it, you don't know what it's like. Well, anyway, Sam's wife didn't feel the same way, unbelievably. She told her husband either abandon the baby, which is actually legal in Armenia, or we're getting a divorce. Fortunately, Dad picked the latter, and his wife did in fact divorce him. What came next is really even more amazing. Sam needed money not only to support the baby, but also to get back to his home country of New Zealand. So he started a crowdfunding campaign over a week ago, and it was on GoFundMe.com, and it was titled Bring Leo Home, as you see there. You'll never believe it. Well, you probably do. The story went viral. And in 10 days, over $350,000 was raised. An amazing story indeed. Lisa, could you imagine the option of ditching your child after they're born, regardless of their mental capacity?
No, of course not. I have 3 children, and actually, I read this story a couple of days ago, and it made me cry. But I think because I think most of us think we think of a mother having natural maternal instincts and would never reject or abandon his or her child. But what I took out of this story was what an amazing and wonderful father this little boy is lucky to have. And he is fortunate to have, he doesn't have it in a mother, but what he has in a father. And that's what I took away, that this father doesn't have much, but he's willing to do whatever he can, doesn't know what he's going to do, doesn't know how he's going to take care of him, but it's his son.
Jenny, any sympathy at all for the mother's plight as far as being tasked with raising a child with Down syndrome for the rest of his life?
Here's what I think. It's heartbreaking, and I think she made the wrong decision. The minister's heart in me wants to not rush to judgment because I'm really hoping she'll get some counseling and maybe the support that she needs to be in her son's life. Maybe she'll change her mind. You know, I don't know what the situation is in Armenia in regard to women. I know it's not that long ago in the world at large that women were really valued on their ability to have children, to give those healthy children to their husband and their community. And when they weren't able to do so, it was a real shock to the system for women. And so I don't know. I think there could be guilt. I think there could be shame on the part of the mother, feeling like her body did this to her child. I don't know. I can't even
I
imagine.
Consider that. Rick, you've been around children with Down syndrome
Yes.
before.
I don't want to judge the mother. I'll leave that to however she decides to be judged. But I will say this: she doesn't know what she's missing.
Right.
While it's very, very hard work for parents to raise a child like that, I have known people with Down syndrome, and there's something unbelievably special about them that makes you think. They don't seem to be an accident or just a genetic screw up or whatever the problem is. They are unbelievably sweet people. They are loving people. They are funny people. There's something, just they touch your heart the minute you meet somebody who does have Down syndrome. So, what I would say to the mother is, you don't know what you're missing.
Well said. Lisa, let me ask you a question because we're a little low on time. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, and it's a very personal decision. But it's one that my wife and I, as I said, I had a beautiful baby daughter about 15 months ago. She's beautiful, and I keep saying it over and over again, and she's healthy. But we did talk about, before my wife got pregnant, what if we learned that our child has Down syndrome very early in the pregnancy? What would we do? What would you do?
I thought that as well before I had my first child. And I thought, well, I'm going to have, if I find something out, I don't know, I might have an abortion. It wasn't until I had children, it wasn't until I saw the sonograms. And I saw the sonograms from very early on, and from 8 weeks on, and saw what looked like a little peanut with a beating heart. And then that turns out to be your daughter.
Right.
And so that changes everything. You somehow learn to love it's your child.
Jenny, I'll have to ask you this as well, but we're short on time. 15 seconds.
Well, I don't have children, and I just recently got married. So, but there's so much new technology that people are grappling with. We have moral conundrums that we didn't have in the past, and I think people are really having to look at their values. My instinct would be to keep the baby.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat there, as hard as it would be. But after having a child, I know I could never abort it or certainly get rid of it like in Armenia. Coming up next, arguably the best part of the show, political potluck. This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax TV. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap, everybody. It's time for political potluck. And you know the drill, veteran viewers. Political potluck is where each of us brings a story to a party, just like bringing a dish to potluck dinner. Okay, let's start with you, Lisa Jandovitz.
Well, my story today is, there's been a lot of talk this week with Sports Illustrated's annual swimsuit edition coming out, celebrating beautiful women in bikinis. You're smiling quite a lot, Rick.
Annual edition.
Beautiful women in bikinis for men to look at.
Is Crumpton on the cover?
And well, maybe you're inside.
We're actually 2008, right?
And
you actually speechless. It can be done. Speechless.
I'm a minister.
Anyway, we keep interrupting you.
And that's
Sorry,
okay.
Lisa.
That's okay. Why just celebrate women's bodies? Why can't there be a male Sports Illustrated?
They're on
swimsuit
Sports
edition
Illustrated every month.
with gorgeous men with ripped abs, kind of like Magic Mike. And why not? Why is it always women are looked at in that way? Women are looked at as sexual objects and objects of beauty, but why not for male?
So you want Channing Tatum on the cover?
I want Channing Tatum. I want the whole Magic
But you
Mike.
get that every month.
Where?
You don't.
On the cover of Sports Illustrated. They
No,
don't normally put
different.
girls
They have
on
pants
there.
and uniforms on them.
Rick, it's not overtly sexualized.
Exactly. Did you
It's
Well,
the
I
men
wouldn't
are
know,
on the
'cause they're
cover for
men.
their
No.
athletic prowess.
Right. What is that?
And that's
There's
what the
nothing
difference
athletic.
is.
Exactly.
And here's the thing that I have a problem with. Sports Illustrated is not just for grown men. There are little boys,
Yes.
little girls who read Sports Illustrated. They're aspiring sports people, and they get an idea of women's value That's
Look at Joe.
That's
Joe's
really
watching the
just-
graphic on the screen.
and Joe's drooling. But when your little girl, Joe, grows up and wants to play soccer, she'll have serious cognitive dissonance when she looks at that cover. No, have you ever been a little girl, Rick?
No.
No.
Strangely.
Trust
Although
me.
I've been accused of it. I've been
One
accused of it.
positive, though.
Little girls have cognitive dissonance over this sexualizing of women, especially in a sports context. It's just very odd.
It's kind of, but the one
I'm
positive I have to
serious.
say that
It's hurtful.
that Sports Illustrated did do was that they did put plus-size models
Yes.
inside.
Yeah, I thought
now,
that's what you were going to
good.
talk
no,
about.
but the thing is that actually there is one model that's in an ad. She's a size 16. And she's beautiful. She's a true plus-size model. The plus-size model that Sports Illustrated put in, if you look at the picture. They say she's a size 12 and she's a plus-size model. She does not look like a
No.
plus-size
You didn't get a
model.
fine print. She's a 1.2, not a 12. There was a
I
decimal
was
point
like,
in there.
plus-size where?
That is a
It's a
very fair
baby
comment.
We have to get
I looked at
to
it.
our next
I had the
hot
same
luck,
reaction.
but I'll end it with you'll never believe this, but the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue is always the highest selling issue of the year.
Really?
Of course.
Yes. So
I'm shocked.
who's got the next
A little
casserole here?
TNA.
Who's serving up? Who's
What?
Unger?
Oh, it's me?
Yeah, Ricky.
Okay, so
Cough it up.
I entitled this Meet the New Obamacare, same as this. Oh, I don't remember what I entitled it. You probably heard yesterday that Congress shockingly voted once again to repeal Obamacare. Who would have thought, right? What is this, 68th time they've
So
done
it's
it?
gone? It's over?
So
It's done?
No, it's not
Oh,
done. But what's
okay.
amazing
Don't get
is
excited.
a couple, Senator Hatch and a few of his friends gave us the latest, greatest replacement, which is pretty much the same replacement they've been offering all along, and it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Well, there are some things in there that are interesting. They cut the subsidies, if you like that. They do let you keep it for your kids at 26, but you know what the problem is? They're pretending that people with pre-existing conditions can still be insured under their plan without there being an individual mandate. Guess what, folks? In the history of humanity, nobody has figured out how to get insurance companies to provide insurance to people with pre-existing health problems unless there's an individual mandate, because otherwise the prices would be way too high.
Do you think this has been a success for the president, net? Because not all of it has been obviously
Right.
implemented because it was pushed after
Right.
the election. Still an incomplete in your mind, because we heard about subsidies going up
Yeah.
and premiums going up and losing your doctor, and that was a big
The honest answer that nobody wants to hear is that we haven't had enough time to find out. There are some things that have been successful, some things that haven't, which is to be expected, and some things that the jury's still out on. The biggest problem we have is that because of the way Congress is behaving, things that we know should be fixed, like any major law has things that have to be fixed, they won't fix them.
Will the next presidential campaign
Yes.
feature repealing Obamacare from the GOP side, or have they given up on it?
It certainly will from the GOP side, unless the public opinion changes, which it could. It could. It's not getting better yet, and it may never get better. But as long as public opinion is where it is, the GOP is always going to campaign against it.
And on that note, we'll leave it there. Mitt Romney isn't running this time, obviously, so he won't have to dance around that issue anymore, which was quite tricky with Romneycare. Anyway, coming up next, more of the best part of the Daily Wrap. It is political potluck, including mine. This is a Daily Wrap on Newsmax TV from not too cold New York City. And welcome back to the show, everybody. Right now, we're talking about our favorite stories of the day. Jenny, what are you serving up?
Okay, so after the attacks last month in Paris, obviously a lot of security was tightened around the Paris streets and malls and synagogues especially. But now they've decided they will not let film or TV crews film action scenes on the streets of Paris. Keep in mind, this is an iconic setting where films like The Bourne Identity and Taken and Lucy have been filmed. But the fear is that either terrorists will attack actors thinking that they're really...
And welcome back to the show, everybody. By the way, just to tag out of our last segment, 1921 was when Radio Shack was founded, and we kind of talked around the table like 1921, what could people possibly be buying from Radio Shack in 1921? And all the geniuses around the table decided that they were buying radios, and that's why it was called that. So yes, you come here for all of your information.
Mystery
Yeah,
solved.
right? Crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to Prompter. We got some good news from the Labor Department today. Employers added 257,000 jobs in January. Yes, that beat expectations. Meanwhile, the unemployment ticked up from 5.6% to 5.7%, mainly due to more people deciding to look for jobs. Hey, maybe I'll go look for a job after all. Look at that. Everybody must be impressed, right? Yet. Gallup CEO and Chairman Jim Clifton said this, quote, "There's no other way to say this. The official unemployment rate amounts to a big lie." Why? Mr. Clifton explains on Fox News.
The number of full-time jobs, and that's what everybody wants, as a percent of the total population is the lowest it's ever been. That's what that number doesn't show. The consequences are of that. Well, there was at the recession, we lost 13 million jobs. Only 3 million have come back.
Happy guy. So Clifton argues the actual real unemployment rate is much, much higher, and he's right. And the federal government, yeah, they know it. Now, there are two unemployment numbers, okay? Everybody sit down and try to grab all of this, okay? The main number and the U6 number, which is the total unemployed, plus marginally attached workers, plus total employed part-time for economic reasons, plus, or excuse me, as a percent of all civilian labor force, plus marginally attached workers. Rick Unger, you work at Forbes. What the heck does all this mean? And should the government use the U6 number, which, by the way, is currently at 11%?
Close to 11.5%. You can make the argument both ways. There's a reason that they don't use that number, and that's because it doesn't take into account people who are leaving the workforce voluntarily. We've got a baby boomers generation retiring now, so there's a larger number of people who would not be seeking employment even in the best of times. This is what throws that number off a little bit. He is right, though, when he says the number that we rely on, which is at about 5.8, it went up a little bit.
It's 7
today.
now, yeah, 5.7.
But which, by the way, is actually good news that it went up, because it means that more people who were not in the labor
looking for
force
work.
are coming back in. But he's right. There are more unemployed than that. What we have trouble determining, though, is are they doing it because they've just given up on looking for a job, or because they got old? To me, what's important is that you keep the comparison the same. You can use either number. As long as it's coming down, it's a good thing.
You know what always confuses me? That when I see 5.7%, and I say, boy, that's pretty
That's
good.
not bad.
Right. But I don't know how many of those are part-time
Right.
and full-time.
Right.
And that's a big difference.
It's a very fair point, and even within that, we have a higher part-time number right now, which makes you think, well, that's not good. But at the same time, we actually know that more people want part-time. So
Or they
it can
can't get the work, though, as well.
Well, there are those. There are those who would like full-time and can't get it. That's
Or those
right.
that
But
are
isn't-
also severely underemployed.
Right,
They might
yes.
be engineers that are
And then there's
working
the-
way outside of their field.
That's right. And then the biggest issue is, even those who are getting employment finally, are they being paid a decent wage?
Jenny?
Well, you know, there's a big buzz in the business world. There's a skill gap in our country. We're going through a huge transition with technology. So, you know, education-wise and business-wise, there are tons of tech jobs. Tons of them out there, and they can't find enough people to fill them.
You're right about that.
Because people don't have the education they need yet. And so, you know, they're trying to bring in people who have the right skills. They can't find the right people with the right skills. And then once, you know, if people do get into the job position, oftentimes they have to leave because they can't keep up with it. They're not doing the job well. So, you know, I think one of the things we can't forget about is the educational skill gap in our country, and really needing to start catching up with that.
No, you're right about that. I have a cousin, for instance, who actually was rejected for a job recently in the exact change lane on the Garden State Parkway. How hard can this
How
be?
not going to be?
Right?
You know what else is in? And Jenny, you're absolutely right about that.
No one
But-
got that joke, by the way.
Yeah,
it
it,
was
wasn't,
funny.
it went right over. Yeah.
Because I said it so seriously. I said
Didn't want to laugh at
we
your
need somebody in the exact change.
You know what else is happening, though, that people have to keep in mind? Because of this recession we've had, we think everything is all about jobs not being available. For years, we've been hearing that the day was coming when machinery would take the place of people. Guess what? It's here. This problem is not going away with a new
Right.
president or a better economy.
Right.
We are still going to have this problem.
We see robots now that
Yeah.
actually in warehouses can take deliveries,
That's
probably
right.
with Amazon,
That's
and,
right.
and ship them where you don't even need a human being. Or whenever you call somebody now, the first 10 things you have to go through are voice prompts
not
by
a
a
person.
computer and not a person.
That's right.
Exactly. You're no longer plugging
you can
in
go
the
to
wire.
restaurants today and order with the machine, not through a person.
Exactly. And we'll have to leave it there. So that's a wrap, everybody. And thanks so much to Lisa and Ricky and Jenny. I'm Joey. We hope you have a great weekend. It should be a good one. Without football for the first time in 23 weeks. That's depressing. Anyway, I am Joe Concha. This is the Daily Wrap from New York. Good night, everybody.